In Rome, a couple of meters away from the Antic Forum, the Mamertine prison is one of the oldest places of worship of St. Peter. According to tradition, that's where he spent his last days. He was almost 70 years old. We have to go down to the depths of the prison to discover the bleak cell St. Peter was supposedly kept in, like a descent into hell.
The conditions were awful. Here we can see holes in the walls, and that's because there were chains, and the prisoners were attached to them.
That prison, dug in the ground, is almost 2,700 years old. This is the most famous and most terrible prison of the whole Roman Empire. Prisoners locked in here, in this humid and dirty cell, could stay there for years before dying of cold, hunger, or disease. Such a foul fate awaited the worst traitors of the Roman Empire.
This was the prison of the Roman state, the high-security prison for political prisoners. Vercingetorix, a Gallic king, was locked here for more than 6 years before being executed by Caesar.
But what could St. Peter have done to deserve being locked in such a dark prison, reserved for the worst enemies of Rome? The Catholic tradition shows St. Peter's death as something exceptional. Indeed, the Prince of the Apostles was supposedly found guilty of the worst fire Rome had ever known.
The traditional story about Peter's end is that he was taken up in the Great Fire of Rome.
The story told by Latin historians of that time, along with archaeological excavations, proved that this great fire indeed happened. During the summer of 64 AD, 3/4 of the city went up in smoke. Thousands of Romans died in the flames amidst total panic.
This fire in Rome has been a trauma. We shouldn't forget it. It almost shook. No, it did shake the authority of Emperor Nero.
Historians today agree more or less that the fire was probably an accident, but at the time, a rumor is spreading in town that the emperor himself set Rome on fire in order to rebuild his ideal city, Neropolis. In order to deflect public discontent and save his power, Nero finds a scapegoat.
In a way to try and deflect blame from himself, Nero said that it was the Christians who'd started the fire.
He scapegoated these Christians, who we're told were already the object of scorn and hatred.
At the end of summer 64 AD, Nero starts one of the first persecutions in history against the Christians. Dozens of men and women are tracked down and arrested. Tradition tells us that St. Peter died during this historical roundup, and that's how he ended up in the Mamertine prison before being executed in such an awful way, along with the other Christians. Indeed, to calm the angry crowd, Nero turns this massacre into a show that thousands of Romans come to see. The emperor even opens up his huge private arena in the Vatican to the public.
There are stories about Christians being put to death on crosses that are then burned, so they're burned alive. So lots and lots of people lost their lives, and it was really very horrible.
According to tradition, St. Peter received a special punishment, crucifixion. But not like Jesus. Peter asked himself to be attached upside down so as not to die like his master.
The fact he's upside down shows that he doesn't feel worthy of exactly the same kind of death.
This tale about the apostles' martyrdom is essential to the Catholic tradition. The St. Peter Basilica was built upon the ruins of Nero's arena. Yet, only the huge 160 meters high obelisk is left from that monument. At the time, the obelisk was located in the center of Nero's arena, and Peter was allegedly crucified at the foot of this giant monolith. But what is actually true in this tale? St. Peter's death seems very mysterious indeed.
A crucifixion is a spectacular ordeal where one dies because of suffocation. Being crucified upside down has no interest since you die much faster, and the spectacular effect isn't the same. So many historians don't really believe in this upside-down crucifixion business.
And so the legend behind St. Peter's death was perhaps exaggerated. But how much exactly? Did he die in Nero's circus? Was he even arrested during the historical roundup? Some facts are confusing. The persecution of 64 AD is told by Latin historians of that time. Yet St. Peter, the leader of the community, is never mentioned.
He's not mentioned, he's not singled out in the pagan accounts as among those executed.
The mystery deepens when reading the Acts of Peter. This Christian text from the 2nd century tells us a completely different version of the death of the apostle.
It is surprising that the Acts of Peter doesn't mention the fire of Rome. It just has Peter put to death for completely other reasons.
What is this other, completely different version of St. Peter's death? In order to find out, our investigation brings us to the Via Appia, the 500-kilometer-long ancient road that connects Rome to the south of Italy. This is where the final part of the Acts of Peter took place. The text says that St. Peter took the Via Appia in order to escape from Rome. It seems he felt threatened in the capital. But the causes are completely unrelated to the Great Fire of 64.
Peter is persecuted, according to the Acts, because of the way he had managed to convert a number of high-class Roman citizens to Christianity and was preaching against Roman mores, and particularly was preaching chastity, which of course the upper-class Romans did not like at all.
When, on the Via Appia, the apostle seemed to suddenly change his mind. According to the Acts of Peter, Jesus came to him and convinced him to accept his martyrdom. And so he went back to Rome to give himself up.
The Acts of Peter are interesting for the things that they don't say rather than what they do say.
If we stick to the strict version of the Acts of Peter, the apostle didn't die with the other Christians during the persecution of 64. His execution had been set apart. So could he truly have died in Nero's circus? The Acts of Peter give no clues as to the place of the martyrdom. During the Middle Ages, the mystery regarding this place is so intense that a brand new theory comes up. 1,500 meters away from the Vatican, there's another church asserting that it was built on the site where St. Peter was crucified, San Pietro in Montorio. The King of Spain himself had this magnificent building built in the beginning of the 15th century. He is convinced that St. Peter was executed here rather than in Nero's circus, and it all started from a mysterious Latin word.
The traditional story about Peter's crucifixion says that he was crucified upside down, inter duas metas.
For a long time, we translated meta as a boundary marker used to mark the end of the track in an arena which matches the official version. But at the end of the 14th century, researchers highlight that the word meta has another, very different meaning.
They started to re-examine the idea of the meta and found that the word meant a pyramid. They decided that perhaps Peter was not crucified in a circus, but midway between two pyramids.
During St. Peter's time, there were indeed two pyramids in Rome, about 3 kilometers apart. About halfway between them, researchers found a site on the hill of the Janiculum. This is where the San Pietro in Montorio church is built. This other location for St. Peter's martyrdom may seem strange, but at the time, it was a serious candidate. In 1445, the Pope ordered the carving of a representation of the Apostles' martyrdom on the bronze doors of St. Peter's Basilica.
we can see there are two pyramids depicted. We can see Nero condemning Peter for crucifixion, and we can see the cortege snaking up the Janiculum Hill.
This theory that dates back to the end of the Middle Ages cannot be confirmed, of course, but it gives rise to doubt. For 2 millennia, the location of St. Peter's martyrdom has been debated, as it is closely connected to the fate of his relics. Indeed, 1,000 years before, Emperor Constantine used the tale of Nero's arena to state that he had found St. Peter's tomb, and during the 4th century AD, he ordered the construction of the first St. Peter's basilica.
Constantine, the emperor, seems to have been built over the grave of Peter, or at least that was believed to be the grave of Peter.
Why is Constantine convinced that St. Peter was buried on the hill of the Vatican? Did he truly find the original tomb? To understand how Constantine could locate the tomb of the Apostle, we have to imagine how the Vatican looked at the time of St. Peter. It was a marshy hill outside the city walls. Only Nero's arena was there, a giant building about 590 meters long, where Peter was supposedly executed. During the 4th century, the arena is already in ruins. Yet Emperor Constantine decides to build a giant 8,000-meter square church right next to it, the first St. Peter's Basilica. The construction is an incredible feat of engineering, as the land is incredibly hostile, but Constantine insists on building the church here and nowhere else.
It was a sloping site, it was marshy. If you had free rein over where to build your basilica, you would naturally find a nice, flat part of the country to put it in.
Only plausible explanation is that he truly believed that this was where Peter had been buried.
Indeed, the emperor is convinced that St. Peter has been buried exactly here, 100 meters from the supposed location of his execution in the center of Nero's arena. He thinks that St. Peter's body was recovered by the first Christians after his martyrdom, just like Jesus. But no source at St. Peter's time corroborates this. Yet Constantine believes in it, because at the time there was a graveyard next to the arena, a vast necropolis that will have to be buried under the basilica's foundations.